Hi, everyone. I guess we can get started. Hey, we're on time. I like this. Awesome. So welcome to Creating Studio Culture. I am Navi Brouwer. I'm from Dinosaur Polo Club. I'm the producer there. You can find me at Naviverse on Twitter. I'm going to go grab my water because I left it over here. Nobody wants awkward mouth sounds. All right, so this quick overview, just so you know what we're going to get ourselves into. So first we're going to start talking about studio culture, so what it is, why it is, so we're all on the same page. Then we're going to start talking about the early stages of Dinosaur Polo Club. So this year they had some exciting things happening. They went from 2 members to 4 members, which was very exciting, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that process. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we're looking ahead to and where we're sort of thinking about going next. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to start looking at studio culture at your own studios or within your own teams as well too, because a lot of these apply to that. And then some things to keep in mind. So it's going to be a little bit of a lightning round of some stuff that I've learned along the way from various experiences and various other people's experiences too. Then we'll talk about resources really quickly, and I'll have a really simple summary for you. So here we go. So what is studio culture? Let's look at that for a sec. So studio culture is the beliefs, behaviors, vision, values, norms, systems, symbols, language, assumptions, habits, and principles of a studio, which is gigantically long. And they're all influenced by factors like history, product, market, technology, strategy, type of employees, management style, and national culture. Hard part's done. Good. When you boil that down, basically it's what is acceptable and what is normal and what can be accepted in a studio. So basically it's the feeling of when you walk in, what you feel like, whether or not you're actually having a good time when you go to work all the time. And this is a really important thing. So why is studio culture important? When it's good, it's really, really good, and when it's bad, it's awful, is sort of the short version of it. When things are going well, you've got people that are really excited and committed. They will talk about it for years. I was at a seminar a little while ago, and they were just reminiscing super amounts about how much they missed some of their companies because they just gelled so well and everything went so well, and when things got stressful, things went okay. They had better productivity in general because everybody actually enjoyed being there. Bad stuff can break and burn out studios. I have seen bad culture just completely wipe out studios before, and they can be big studios, it's not just little ones. So you want to be careful with that and make sure. You also want to make sure that you're not going to be wasting time and money with it, because it will absolutely do all of those things. So the important question you want to ask is, ask the people that are in your studio do you look forward to coming to work every day? And it seems like a really simple question, but like if you think about it, you want to know that you're actually enjoying it, and if you're not, you want to be able to figure out why. So, important things to note. Culture will develop whether or not you actually do anything to help it. Everybody has culture norms. When you get with a social group, you will have a bunch of things that you do with those friends. You want to make sure that you're actually making sure that you are doing what you can to make sure that it's you want to make sure that you're actually influencing it, because if you don't, it is going to catch up with you, and you will get norms that will start happening, and they might not be great ones. You might be fine. Like, there's an absolutely big chance that you might be okay, but you want to be knowing that you're okay as opposed to just sort of seeing what happens. You also want to keep in mind that your studio culture already exists. I don't care if you are a big team. I don't care if you're a small team. You could be one person. You might not even have a studio yet, but are thinking about starting one. Your studio culture already exists. It's whatever you are already doing and the things that you find okay. So keep that in mind at all times. Also keep in mind that if you're the leadership really matters on that one. Everybody's going to follow your lead. So if you don't think you've got a culture, they probably don't either. So it's really important. So to sort of get guide along with this, we can start talking about Dinosaur Polo Club this year. So our very early stages. So we are founded by Robert and Peter Curry. They are not only brothers, but they are twin brothers, which means that our culture was started in utero. Couldn't get a picture from that. They didn't do that in the 80s, which is fine. But they have been building their culture since they started. Now they look like this. Very handsome gentlemen. And at this point in time, like, we have a culture already. Before they even thought about actually hiring anybody else, they also already were like well into Star Wars Lego, bad puns, talking about Spelunky no matter what, caring about the game dev community a whole bunch, and being generally snappy dressers. They put me to shame most of the time. It's fine. So they had culture ideas sort sort of floating around in the back of their heads. But by the time they actually got to Mini Metro and things like that, they sort of knew that they needed to start paying attention to it. I mean, they had already reached out to contractors, and that was sort of forming up, but it didn't really start hitting home until this happened. So they realized that they had sort of more jobs than they can actually do, and so they needed to expand, which means doing the scary thing of adding another person into your studio. And so working with contractors is cool, but for the most part, they were in different places. Now they're going to have somebody that's hanging out every workday with them, and that's scary. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, adding more people is really scary, especially when you're really tiny. So they needed to think about what they were going to do to show their new hire, me, what they were going to be valuing, like how they valued them. And they needed to make sure that, every day I came in and I actually enjoyed what I was doing. So I'm going to take a water sip. So one of the things that they realized really quickly is that as soon as you start talking to people, you're starting to show the values of your company. You're starting to show what your culture is. If you respond in a way that's really not nice to somebody who has asked for an interview, people are not going to think you're a particularly great company. Every interaction that you have is going to be really important. So we found ways to be able to make sure they do this, to do this, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. So the first thing that we kind of ran into that really started solidifying things, or at least for me, was after we'd had the interview was lovely and was great, and I felt really good about everything. And then there's the contract, and the contract is always a scary thing, because you're like, all right, we got lawyers involved, like not necessarily actually lawyers, but there's somebody writing a contract. This is something that like is going to affect all of my career. I need to be careful with this. So I was reading through it, and like there was the contract terms, and there was compensation, which was fine. That wasn't the thing that actually caught my attention. It was a thing like our sick days. So in New Zealand, you're entitled to 5 by the government. I have 10. And not only that, but I've got 10, and I understand that we have agreement, a verbal agreement, that it's only 10 if you're really abusing it, as long as like things are actually like understood. Like they don't want me coming to work. If I have a situation where I'm really sick, they don't want me there. Nobody wants to get my germs. And I don't want to be sitting there hacking in a corner trying to get work done and feeling like crap. So I have the freedom to go home when I need to, rest up real quick, and come back. And I probably won't even need most of my 10 ones. I'm most of the way through the year, and I don't think I've used one yet, because we've actually been really good about that kind of stuff. We also have creative freedom with our company, which was really important for me. I run game jams, and so I understand the importance of game jams. And I know that when I don't have creative freedom, like that is the way that game developers learn. They go out, they go in, like, do game jams, and they brush up their skills, they try new stuff, and that's a really good way for them to be able to learn, especially if you don't actually have time made for you within your company to do so. And so if I have a contract that says you can't do that, I'm like, well, how else am I going to get better? So that was something that told me a lot about the company and what they valued. They valued me, and in tandem, we were going to work together to make me a better person. So this led to one of our main pillars of culture within our studio. So we make people-focused decisions. We basically put ourselves in their position and say, is this good? Does this suck? Would I be happy if this was me that I was going to be in this situation, given my circumstances? So we have things like paychecks coming every 2 weeks. For the most part, we're all fine with that whole monthly thing, and we would be... it would be a lot easier for us in some ways with calculations if we were paid monthly. However, we understand that not everybody is able to budget like that, and we don't want anybody starving by the time the end of the month happens. So we kept that in mind, and we do it the hard way because it's better for the people that are going to be involved. We also have a super strict rule around crunch, which is we don't do it. If we have to do it, it's overtime, and it's optional, and it's paid. Because like, crunch is a scary thing. It can accumulate, it can become normal, and as soon as you get to that point, you're already losing, like, your profitability, you're losing a whole bunch of stuff. It's an absolute known fact that most people know at this point that after 2 weeks of crunch, it doesn't really matter. You could crunch all you want, you're not gonna actually get any higher productivity. Those first 2 weeks can be okay as long as you're not doing crunch too often, but you gotta keep that kind of stuff in mind, and we do. At 5 o'clock, we go home. Peter has 2 kids. He's going home, and he's going to see his children. The rest of us don't have to stay there either, and our leadership also, both of them, will go home at 5 o'clock so we don't feel like we have to stay. We also have, really quickly throw in, we also have things like rev share. So that is something that is sort of in our future prospects, but we're actually going to be looking at that because we want to make sure that our teams feel like we have some ownership over what we're going to get. And that might evolve and change over time, but at the moment, that's really valuable for us because we're going to actually feel a little bit more committed to it. We don't know what that looks like yet. We might share it when we get to that point. But we'll, at this point, that's something that's really good for me and knows that lets me know that I am invested in this, and they care about whether or not I'm invested in this. And hopefully, if things go really well, hopefully, I might actually be able to spawn off and start my own studio, because I had that little bit of backing, and it expands our community, which is another thing that's really important to our studio. All right, so my first day and the days after. You get one chance to make a good first impression, and I can tell you that when you have a really good first impression, it means a whole lot. If you actually feel welcome when you show up, it colors the entire way that you go through at least the first year, and if not longer than that. So when I got there, we had a cool little selfie moment, and they put me up on their site, which was really lovely, on the Twitter feed. And then we went out for, we did that thing where you, download hardware and get that all sorted out, but we also went for lunch. And they took me out for lunch, which was really lovely, because I actually felt like that they actually cared. They, booked off the day as, a non-productive one, because we knew we were going to be talking a whole bunch. But it made me feel like I actually belonged there, and I needed to be there. And that continued all the way through. So, I got to have my own desk. I got to have my little toys hanging out, so I actually, felt a little more at home, which was fine. Once we went to GDC, that whole left side of their string is me and my GDC pictures. So once we got back, we got the photos developed, and I was immediately up on our friends wall, which was really lovely. It made me feel like they actually cared, because beforehand it was mostly just them. Then we do things like we go hang out, and we actually had 2 of our team members who are contracting, so they live in Auckland. They came down to visit. One of the Fridays, we had Hero Quest Day, and Rob decided to DM for us, and it was hilarious and adorable, and we had donuts. It was perfect. Really good ways of being able to make people feel welcome and give them a space that they actually want to be at. So yeah, it just made everything so much better. So putting that effort in really actually matters, and it will stick with people, and they won't tell you if you don't do it, which is the important thing. You got to remember that not everybody's going to speak up about that kind of stuff. Water break time. So, not long after I started, I think we calculated it down to a month, we started thinking about adding another member to the team. And we knew that we needed to do that because Peter was super slogged with trying to program a whole bunch of stuff and not having the time, so we were all right, we need another programmer. So at that point in time, we started planning a second hire, and in order to do that, we looked at our previous process of bringing me on. And we sort of realized that we had a couple of gaps. At that same point in time, I was talking to my friend Camila Vincent. She works at Mountains, and she's in the same position as me, small team, new producer. We're trading things back and forth just to see what works, because it's good to have a partner for that. She sent me her handbook, and encouraged me to do my own. I flicked through it, and I was like, hey, this is actually really useful. So, ta-da, we have the Dinosaur Care and Maintenance Guide. So, I won't go through the whole thing, because the whole thing is really long and comprehensive, but I actually have just posted on my Twitter, it's what I was doing a second ago, the handbook. It is obviously a redacted version a little bit, so that you guys can take a look at it. You are welcome to copy it, you are welcome to fill it in with your own stuff, you can do whatever you want. Just go to my Twitter page and you'll be able to find it. I'm going to have it up there, I'm going to pin it on my page for forever and a day. So you're welcome to come take a look at it. It's got a whole bunch of really cool stuff. It's a lot of what our personal practices are. We didn't really change things. We just took stuff out that was please, I'm not going to tell you the code to our building. Things like that. So it helped us in a lot of ways, so I'll talk about a couple of the really important ones that it sort of got us to do. We had a couple of people while we were interviewing for our programmer's position that, what are your what is your studio? Give us the blah of your studio. And we realized we didn't actually have the studio values written out already, and so it gave us a good forum for us to actually figure out what do we care about. And it turned out to look like something like this. So, it basically helped us filter down, and now we had the thing that was us. What do we do? How are we different than other people? What is it that Dinosaur Polo Club is all about? So, I'm going to switch. Good. So we support our people. And this was a really big one. Our support section, so we've got how do we support you? And it's 2 pages long, maybe longer than that, I think. But it's got a lot of really good information. And I mean, supporting people can, again, mean compensation. You want to give people enough money that they're not stressing out about it, because they will spend a lot of their time. There's been a whole bunch of studies done about actually compensating people enough so that they're able to meet basic needs. It's really important, because they won't be spending as much time if they're being compensated properly. They won't be spending as much time thinking about how much they don't have any money versus actually doing the job that you're paying them to do. Water break. Again, we have things for physical health. So, if you have an appointment, then you can just go to your appointment. We are generally, you're an adult, please work about 40 hours a week. If you need to go for an appointment, go to the appointment. It's not going to get docked off your sick days. If you take a lot of appointments, then maybe we're going to be suspicious, but we try and develop an actual level of trust so we don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And again, the sick days thing comes right in there. I'm really proud of the fact that we have a section on mental health. So you can take mental health days just the same as you take sick days. They're included in that package, and if things are not going well, you can either talk to us or we can help you find somebody, or we talk about Checkpoint as well too. We have the link right in there so that if people want to actually go to Checkpoint and they're really awesome, they will be able to find help for things like, if they are just dealing with burnout and they're trying to figure out how to sort that out, whether it's because of us or because of something else. Hopefully it's not because of us. They will have resources to go sort that stuff out, especially if they're not, again, comfortable with talking to us. It also has a lot of information about dealing with anxiety or depression, which is something that way too many people have to deal with, and so it's a good starting point for them to get started there. We also have support in terms of education. At this point of time, currently all four of us will get to go to the our four major festivals, which is Play-by-Play, GCAP, obviously NZGDC, and then GDC as well too, which is of course a big expense and may or may not be something we get to continue, but right now it's really important to get us in a place where we can be representing and go educate ourselves and all that kind of stuff. And that was huge, because that is something that you want to do, but you have to sometimes take off time for work. And as we expand, again, that might have to change, but at this point in time, super good. They also allow us, again, to do game jams and things like that, and everything that we can sort of do for each other is just going to help us both get better, and that's the kind of mindset you want to have. And again, we've got emotional support, so if something goes bad on Twitter, we have a statement in there that doesn't per se exactly what we're going to do, but it says that we're going to be there for you and we're going to actually help you out, as long as you weren't being a jerk. So, we changed the name of things, so you'll notice it was the Dinosaur Guide. We try to use language that actually works for us. We were kind of weirded out by human resources, because it was bringing on feeling of humans as resources, which is kind of gross when you think about it. They're people. They're people, so we just stick with dinos. Another thing is that we have grooming was a word that was causing problems, because if you have children, you may understand the context that grooming can sometimes mean, which is really gross. And so I have enough problems trying to get us to do backlogging or backlog grooming without negative connotations to the word, so we just changed to backlogging, which made it really easy. And those kind of changes can be simple and really powerful. It also means that you're paying attention to the people around you. They're actually going to respect you for trying to make a change that's going to help them out. Okay, so core values can't always be written down. So the handbook will get you so far. And then there's the whole interacting with people thing, and that actually is really important as well too. So we have a bunch of things that we've learned over the next little while, and one of the biggest ones is that we encourage communication. One of the things that I'm super proud of Robert for doing is we have one-on-ones every week. So everybody will have a one-on-one with usually their lead or whoever they report to. And the whole point is to try and get rid of any kinds of problems or little issues that are sort of hanging in the background, and we try and encourage disclosure of everything. It doesn't matter if it's tiny. I don't want that festering into something 3 months down the road. And so because we have these constant check-ins, we sort of know where each other's at. We know what's going on personal lives, so if that kind of stuff is causing problems. And you can do this with small teams and sort of branch it out in order to be able to make this sustainable with something larger. So and it doesn't it doesn't have to be fast, or it doesn't have to be long. Ours are usually 5 minutes, and then we'll get distracted and talk about something else, which is great, because company culture, relating with each other. But if we needed to, we could actually probably keep them down to 5 minutes, so they can be really snappy. We also encourage mistakes, or at least we do not punish people for mistakes, so long as if a mistake is made, they're sort of working to try and correct it or learn from it. And that can be really important for a whole plethora of things, but it saves us from the fear, that paralyzing fear of, oh God, I did it wrong. So definitely something that I would recommend in general for life, but is something that can be really important, especially in games. We also have weird ways that we communicate in different spots or ways that we work. We try and pay attention to that as well too. And then we have things like the fact that we talk to each other a lot because we really like each other, and sometimes we'll get distracted. And so we've actually done things like instilling headphone time where we're not allowed to communicate unless we type it in Slack. And that does a really good job of filtering it because it means that we have to actually think about the thing we're writing, and we're like, should I actually bother with that? I'm just going to put that over on that notepad over there, and we'll come back to that later. And that way we actually get some work done. So we give people agency and trust them to do their best. We follow the rule of hire people that are smarter than you, which is a really good rule. And then we trust them to actually do the thing we hired them to do. So we work with them. Again, we have that mistakes sort of buffer there. Sorry. But we also trust them to know their limits, and hopefully they'll be able to come to us when they're actually stuck with something so we can work as a group to try and figure it out. If you practice Agile or Scrum or something like that, it's like built right into it. And if you need a really good resource for that, I've got one link later, but it's a really, like the framework is built around that kind of concept if you're using it properly. We also want to make sure that people are going to where their career, like towards their career goals. So we'll talk to them and give them the agency to be able to sort of move in the direction they want to go. I wanted to learn how to do like playtests. Guess what I've learned how to do? Playtests. Hopefully I'll get to test it soon. We'll see how that goes. So we also, again, with that, we want them to feel ownership over their projects, and that's a bunch of things together. So it's the rev share is part of it, but also like part of communications, making sure that people are speaking their thoughts about the project and giving them the space to do so, part of just giving them agency over the work that they're doing, career trajectory stuff, all that kind of stuff is all about making, helping them be excited and proud and wanting to work on the stuff that they're doing. We're transparent, or we do our best to be. When Peter and Robert were actually building the game, building Mini Metro, they had a dev blog that had like numbers in it and stuff like that, so people could actually see like what numbers look like, because the numbers are usually not quite what you think they would be. And we haven't been doing it as much now because we've been super busy, but it's something that we're talking about actually going back to. But being transparent within the company is also a big value that we have. We try and keep things as open as we can, so everybody's got all the information that they can work with. And I mean, it might be something that we can do as a small company, but big companies do things like that as well too. I know in previous places we've had like big meetings where we've actually talked about where we're at so that everybody kind of has an idea and nobody is surprised when things are not doing well or are doing exceptionally well. And again, when we're doing hiring, we always try and make sure we're giving good, clear feedback. When somebody does, especially a talking interview, we'd have like a page that we would send them back of the stuff that worked really well and the stuff that wasn't quite a fit or what have you. We like to include everyone, so we have people with special diets, we have people who don't necessarily drink, and we have people who need to go to bed at 5 o'clock. Well, not bed, but go home at 5 o'clock. And so we try, God, that would be great. So we make sure that we are working around that. So like for Peter, if we need a day of his time, we make sure that we give Mary like a week of notice so that she'll be able to take over for him for doing parental duties. And hopefully the reciprocation is there too. I'm pretty sure it is. And so we make sure that we make sure that we actually have food that everybody can eat, or we have interesting drinks in case we're having a night where we're doing like office drinks or something like that. We try and make sure that we're keeping conscious of that because people really, really, really appreciate that. It makes them feel like they matter, and that's important. We also like to have fun. Yes. We actually spent an entire day building that stupid Death Star. It was great. Currently is like hanging out in the corner, and it's beautiful. We have things like the off-topic crocodile, which is when we're doing stand-up and we start getting off-topic, and then it just slowly creeps out, and eventually I go like this, and we have to change topics. Gets giggles every time, and I don't know why. We just like, everybody gets sheepish. But it's perfect. It's great. Like, it's part of our culture, and it's really interesting. We go out for ice cream. The picture down there is us going to buy furniture. We went on a field trip. It was great. Those kind of things, and occasionally we have like Moana spontaneous, like very quiet sing-alongs. It's awesome. It was super cute. So we have really cool things that help us build our relationships up with each other, and to help like break stress. Like occasionally you just need to like have a Nerf war to be able to like break the tension because you've been coding something for ages or whatever. It just helps everyone do better. You have a lot more cohesion, and everybody does their jobs better, which works out for everybody. So where are we going from here? Those are kind of the baseline bits. From here, we have a handful of things that we're keeping an eye on. At this point, the main thing is maintaining and monitoring. So we've finally, we got Michael a month ago. And so we have finally and currently Robert is off in France eating really fancy, tasty food. So we are currently at that sort of point where we're just sort of leveling out again. Once everybody's back in the office and we can actually spend some time, we're going to be doing the maintaining and monitoring. So we're going to make sure that we're upholding the stuff that we've said we're going to do, and we're going to be making sure that we're continuing to like make sure that it's working okay and that everybody's happy with where we're at. And that's really important to do like all the time. You want to make sure you make time for that, but I'll talk a little bit more about that after. We are working to increase our diversity. Currently, we have in office 3 hetero-cis-able neurotypical white dudes and 1 hetero-cis-able neurotypical white woman. So we have some work to do, and we know that we have some work to do. When we look at our contractors, we're doing a little bit better that way, which is good, but we're still trying to make sure that we're actually keeping that in mind because we don't want to get into what's called diversity debt. And you can look it up. I've got an article, again, linked, that does a lot better job of explaining it than I will, but essentially, if you start getting in diversity debt, aka you keep hiring homogenous people, your thinking will end up getting the same, and then you will run into problems that can eventually sometimes become toxic, and it's not great. And it takes effort in order to be able to hire diversely, and we know that, and we are working on whatever we can do to be able to try and make that work. So it's going to be hard, and we'll see how it goes, and maybe I'll be able to report next year about how we're doing. Hopefully it goes well. So. We also have culture goals that we're going to set. So once we do settle out, we're going to start looking at like, what do we want to look like culturally, as well as like as a company in like 6 months? And what are we going to do in like 5 years? Like, how do we want our business to actually look, and what are the things that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to? And this is something you, again, consistently update, but not quite as often as like actually monitoring the goals. So like every 6 months or maybe a year, you come back and you take a look at it and see how that's going. So where can you start? Sorry, I'm gonna take a drink of water. Okay. I need like cute cat pictures when I do that, God. So this can be, the first slide is definitely for everybody generally, and then I break it down just a little bit, but generally all of this stuff is going to be relative to think about at some point of time anyway. So biggest things, listen and observe. There's a difference between knowing what your culture is and actually actively looking at it. You want to be actually actively paying attention and listening to what people are saying and apply that to them, or apply that to the situation and make sure that it's matching up with what you think it is. Because a lot of time you can be like, oh yeah, our culture's kind of like this, and then you start looking into like the cracks of it and you're like, so not everybody sees our culture like this. And that's important to actually pay attention to, and that's the good start of being able to actually do some changes on it. So ask questions from people. Like, don't be scared to talk to them. Like, one-on-ones are great for this kind of stuff, but like actually like make active efforts to be able to find out what people are thinking, and keep in mind that there might also be power balance worries as well too. So they might tell you one thing, but they might tell their lead, like they, as the founder of a company, they might tell you one thing, but they might tell their lead or like one of their peers something else. And so you got to keep that like in mind, because that power balance thing is scary. Like, you're in charge of their job. You got to remember that at all times. You're the one who gets to fire them. And there might be worries over that, and you've got to be able to judge that well. And check your defensiveness. Like, the first thing you want to do is when somebody's like, yeah, the culture sucks, is be like, no, it doesn't. And it's like, that's not helpful by any stretch. You need to, like, when you're making those kind of inquiries, actually think about it and be like, no, somebody might actually think the culture does suck, and I need to listen to them and find out why. Okay, so if you're new, small, or sort of in like, maybe I'll run a studio one day kind of mode, fill in the handbook. It's a really good start, and it gets you in the right frame of mind for that kind of stuff. Talk to other studios, which I can't stress enough. Studios are really open about this kind of information, but they don't talk about it because there's not really a good forum to do so. So like approaching somebody and being like, how do you like handle this kind of situation is totally awesome. Or like, what, you know, go in with specific questions, because if you're like, what's your culture? People are gonna have no idea where to start. It's gigantic, right? It's a huge topic. So sort of figure out kind of bits and pieces that you want to talk, but talk to them. They're really awesome, really helpful. Pay attention to your day-to-day. So that doesn't mean every day, but like take periods of time and actually pay attention to your day-to-day. Like, what are people doing? How are they doing it? Do they seem like they're really freaking grumpy? Because if they are, chances are something's off. Or maybe something in their home life happened. So be careful about making those associations. And plan your culture goals, because if you're like, okay, I want my studio to be kind of like this, it's a good place to start so that you actually know where you're going. Just make sure you're actually planning proper goals. They're measurable. You want to make sure that you can actually say, yes, I have done this. All right, if you have an established team, give or take in 5 steps, or an established studio. And so this can mean anything from like, I have a big studio, to I have a long-standing studio that's been around for a long time. Step 1 is gather intel. So the things I was talking a little about beforehand, but they're bear repeating. Doing things like talking to leadership as well as asking questions. Surveys I'm going to talk for a little moment. Surveys are really good, but one thing you want to do is make them anonymous, because people who are not comfortable with that or are worried about their jobs might want to actually say, yes, this is actually not great. And you need to pay attention to those people. You can't just be like, oh, whatever, it's just one. Well, maybe there's something that's really off and other people aren't like actually confident enough to be able to say that. If somebody puts their name down, then go and talk to them, but if not, investigate it and actually take the onus to be able to like do something about it, because it's going to be important and it might actually be just sort of the signifier of something that's bigger. Holding social events sounds like a weird one, but like people chill out a little bit more, and if you like, you can measure the temperature of a room. If you have a bunch of people that seem like they're on edge and are like drinking way too much, maybe there's a problem. It also can be a place where you can sort of listen and people might be a little more comfortable because they feel like they're not in a work situation, and you might actually get a bit more of an idea. And it's not necessarily like the most reliable period, but it's definitely one thing that you want to count among all these other things. And as you would any good playtest, make sure you read the tea leaves a little. You're probably going to see a lot of symptoms, but you might not necessarily have associated causes with them yet. So you got to do that thing where you sort of step back and look at the bigger picture of it and make sure that you're actually seeing the right things. Prep a change. So you want to run this prep, you want to run like the idea of the change. So figure out what you want to change first. Carefully consider how you want this change to sort of affect and what your goals are for it. And then run it by a bunch of people that you trust, run it by people that are in a diverse group, or run it by people that it's going to affect. Also run it by bystanders. So you're like, I'm going to change this thing. It doesn't quite affect you, but can you see anything that's a little bit weird or dodge or anything that I haven't thought of? Having all of those people to actually go through it with can be really good at sort of being able to help tailor it. So maybe they won't necessarily be like, yeah, no, don't do it. You'll probably get some of that, but think greater. But if you're getting, you might actually get some really good ideas from some people who can see it from a different angle. Next bit, make a change, introduce it. Oh my God, please introduce it, especially if a big studio. You don't want to just be like, okay, we're doing this now. You need to actually tell people why you're doing it, be transparent about it. Get into the nitty-gritty about like, this is how this is going to affect them, and also talk to them about how it's a trial and that you're trying something out to see how it'll work, because people hate changing. They absolutely hate changing. They are so stubborn about changing, and they will get like their feet ground into it. But if you give them like the idea that it's got leeway, which it really actually does, if you tell them that it actually has some space to move and grow, they're going to be a little bit more okay with it. It's also going to be super like weird for the first little while as people sort of try and get used to it and have to remember to do the thing, whatever it is, or not do the thing, whatever it is. So like tell them that those phases are going to come. It'll make it a little more comfortable for them. Invite a bunch of questions. Try and think of what those questions might be so you have some answers and you're not completely caught off guard. If you do get caught off guard and you are not quite ready to answer the question, don't answer it and be like, that's a good question. I need to think about this. I will get back to you, and then for the love of God, get back to them. Write it down if you need to. But you are way better off giving them an answer later than just giving them whatever you can think of first and then creating this like weird thing if it's the wrong answer. And I think the biggest thing out of all of these is that as a leader, you need to do the thing. If you say you're going to do a thing, everybody is going to look up to you. Absolutely everybody. If you say that you're going to do a thing and then you don't do it, nobody's going to like want to follow it, because obviously it's not important and you don't have to do it, so why should I? Also, the people who you are making this change for, or the people who are actually trying, are going to feel absolutely betrayed, because they're going to be like, all right, like, great, you made this change and you don't even give a shit, right? Like, it's the worst kind of feeling. So as a leader, in whatever position you're in, whether you're a lead, whether you're anything, make sure that you're making the example, because people will look up to you. And I will probably say this like 4 more times, but it's really important. So the next one, take feedback about the change. Expect all kinds of feedback. Again, with the no offensive thing. Like, it's not about you, it's about the situation. You will probably, have a bunch of suggestions about how maybe to change it. Take them into consideration. If there are some like low impact changes, make sure they're low impact. But if there's something that's not going to be like a huge big deal to change, make the change. Why not? If it's like something tiny, like for us, it was like, oh, we're going to use backlogging as a term. Done. Easy. Problem solved. And just make sure that everybody knows about that low impact change. You can't just, unless you're just doing it within your one team. If things aren't working, take a look at them. Make sure that if you need to change stuff around, you can do that. It's fine. But be really careful about how you do it and make sure that you just don't decide to do it and then swing backwards, because people really don't like that. Then revisit the change. So after the change has settled out a little, revisit it in like 6 months. Take a look and see how it's doing. Come back to it and make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to in the long term. Okay. And then when change happens unintentionally, sleep on it. Don't rush to decisions for the same reasons I was talking before. Make sure you research it really well, and then actively decide whether or not it actually needs to be changed. So sometimes it can be like, whoa, this is a scary thing, and find out whether or not it's actually something that is persistent or important or big, and figure out the ways that you can change in order to be able to figure it out. But don't necessarily just go with your first gut idea, because it will end up in tears. How do you know if your culture is good or bad? I'm going to say culture is a spectrum. Usually you're somewhere on the scale from it, and it's way easier to think about that instead of thinking black and white terms. When you're good, even when the work is tough, your studios will sort of band together and they will go and like trump in and they will go do the thing. And as long as you're not like burning them out with crunch, chances are things will go really, really well. If your culture is bad, a term that comes up a lot of the time is politics. And if you're starting to hear that word around your studio, it might be worth it taking a look in and taking a look at the people that are there and the reasons why those words are being thrown around. It's not always indignant, but indignant, that's not the word either. It's not always an indicator, but it can be in a lot of ways. So some things to keep in mind. This is going to be a lightning round because I don't have a whole lot of time left, I don't think. I've got, not bad. Okay, so things to keep in mind. Developing and fostering healthy culture takes time and energy and money, and I will not lie about that part. You are going to be spending a little bit more money than if you were going the cheap route. You're going to have to spend time planning, and you need to actually plan and block out that time. It's really important. It's not the cheap or easy method, but in the long term, it actually ends up being way, way worth it. You will get better products, you will be happier people, you will not be spending a whole bunch of time rehiring because people are turning through your company. Like, it's a big thing to sort of pay attention to, and if you can manage to do it, it can be really awesome. I want to put in a really quick throw in about contractors and QA. They are not disposable. They are people. They have things that they are doing with their life. Their contracts, when they have higher prices, of course they do. They have a bunch of living expenses that somebody who is working in a studio probably isn't going to have to deal with. And if you haven't seen what the Hobbit law is, I'll have a link in the thing. My God, is it terrifying in terms of the rights that contractors have because of the Hobbit movies. It's a terrifying story. You should definitely take a look at it because it means that it can be abused a little bit. Again, plan time to focus on it, so actually put it in your schedule, make sure that you've got that time stuck in there. Good times to actually take a look at stuff after big milestones. You can do it during the middle of milestones, but things can get a little fuzzy there. If you're actually just about to start a new big milestone, it can be a good time to implement a change while everybody's a little bit less stressed, and they can sort of try and settle into that change a little easier. And if you have really long milestones or you don't really have milestones, every 6 months is a really good check-in. Every studio will have a different culture, even if it's a parent company. I can tell you from secondhand experience that Ubisoft Toronto and Ubisoft Montreal, very different places. So don't expect just because you're going to one company that it's going to be exactly like another. Figure out the stuff that works for you and learn from other studios and just decide whether or not it's actually going to apply or work with yours. Don't be scared to make decisions or ask people about it, but also keep in mind that you want to pay attention to what's going on in your own studio. Expect there to be constant change, especially if you're growing. You will constantly have new people that are adding new stuff to the mix. You want to keep an eye on things, especially at those points, to make sure that things don't get out of hand and norms that are not great don't get started at that point. So keep that in mind. It'll always be changing, which is why the maintain and monitor thing is really important. Studio culture is iterative. We know that term. We use that all the time. It really is. Until somebody had mentioned it to me, I didn't actually really think of it that way. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're constantly taking this thing and you're perfecting it and you're making it better. So if you can think about it that way, it works as well too. Introduce one change at a time if at all possible. Again, people don't like to change, and if you try and get two changes that happen at the same time, they can sometimes get lost in each other, and so somebody will attribute one thing they don't like about one change to the other change, and you'll end up having problems with both. In a bigger studio, it's harder to change. In an older studio, it's even harder than that. So the longer that you wait to sort of get on top of this, or the bigger your studio gets, the harder it's to change. And that's not necessarily a bad thing at this point, but you want to sort of push that glacier. You want to make sure that you're actively working on the problem. Expect there to be awkwardness, because if you expect it, it can't surprise you. People will also have friction with the issue, but if you pay attention to it, it'll be a lot easier for you to be able to answer the questions and catch weird behaviors and not be on the wrong foot when you get in that situation. Sometimes people won't fit with your culture. Try not to shoehorn things in. There's a reason why we have the 3, at least in New Zealand, we have the 3-month clause. Make sure you understand that clause properly, but if you don't want to introduce somebody in your studio who's really not fitting and is going to cause way more havoc than is necessary. There are people that literally have brought studios down because culture fit wasn't mixing very well, and nobody wants to be in that situation. Again, it comes down to like making sure that you want to actually go to work every day, and if there's somebody that's in there causing issues, you want to make sure that it's not going to be a problem. It's going to suck. Like, that part's hard, I got to tell you. But be transparent about that whole process and it'll get better. Or at least you can feel like you've done your due diligence. Don't sweat the small stuff again. Same with like backlogging. Guilt-free bail is my favorite new term I wanted to share. That comes from the Magic Leap team, which are awesome. If you're in a meeting and the meeting is totally not relevant to you, guilt-free bail, walk out of the room. If you don't feel like you need to be there, then don't be there. And that's a small thing, right? Like, it's not a big thing. If worse comes to worse and something comes up about that meeting, somebody can inform you. But if you're not feeling like you should be there, do something about it. So little stuff like that can be super, super helpful. When in doubt, follow through. If you say you're going to do a thing, oh my gosh, follow through with it. It is the best way to build trust within your company, and it will make sure that everybody respects you and actually depends on you for doing the thing that you're going to do. And when it comes down to it, treat people like people. They are humans. Remember that every step of the way. They are not resources. They are not, they're employees, but that word is still distancing. They're people that are working with you. Treat them accordingly. And if you were this person, would you be happy? Just do it that way. This is my reading material. We're almost at the end, everybody. So, reading material. You can take pictures of it, but I'm going to put all my slides up on the internet, Twitter, that's the one. And I'll link it to my, it's been a long talk. And I'll attach that to the handbook as well too, so it's all in the same place. When the video comes out eventually, I'll probably attach that there too, so you can reference it if you need to. I'm gonna go in 3, 2, 1, good. So if you take away anything from this talk, culture is iterative and requires maintenance. It's not all in the handbook, but the handbook helps. And treat people like people. So thank you, it's a pleasure. Awesome. Thank you. How am I doing for time? Really? Oh God, I must have been going so fast. Well, YouTube, you don't have to press 1.5, do you? Does anybody have any questions? Hello.
As a producer, how do you balance the constant pressure and deadlines against investing time and culture stuff?
A lot of that comes from being able to sort of A, see in the long run, and B, making sure that whoever you're talking to that's paying the paychecks understands the way that you're working and things like that. It comes mostly down to planning. So it's knowing how your team is actually doing it. So people talk about vertical slices or demos and stuff, but during that point of time, you should totally be tracking what your time is so that you have an idea of how long it's going to take you to do things. And if that is not something that's going to end up happening, if you do the math and it's not going to work, rescope. And you want to work, if you can work, so one of the things that's super agile and Scrum based is having really good conversations with investors or publishers or whatever, and just being okay, so this is what's possible, this is what's not possible, how do we make something that's going to make us both happy? And having that consistent dialogue so they're always sort of feeling like they're in is a really good way of being able to do that. Does that help? Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, go for it. So first of all, figure out somebody who you're comfortable having that conversation and who you think is actually going to go back to you. And if you can gather a person that has a little bit more authority than you, or get a couple of people to be able to do that, especially if you're not sure about whether or not that's actually going to be a change that you can make, you'll at least have more people than one, so it won't be just one lonely figure being hi, this is really crap. But you can have a bunch of people that actually agree on that factor, and hopefully at that point in time they can't ignore it. And being an advocate for it as well too, too, even if you're not necessarily like in a leadership position, you can be an advocate for culture regardless of whether or not you're actually a leader. So you can say like, okay, so here's some maybe ideas that we can start working through, and like feed it just a little bit, if that makes sense, and start with small changes and things like that, like something that would have an immediate effect that isn't necessarily like world changing, and get that idea of culture change and things like that, you know, in their heads. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, and we can chat more about it a little bit later if you like. Cool. Anybody else? Oh, I think we're done. Good. Thanks for coming, everybody.